The Falcon 9 will lift off from Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It will fly in a northeasterly trajectory, heading offshore along the east coast of the United States. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one on deck this morning is called Just Read the Instructions. The drone ship is stationed about 385 miles downrange in the Atlantic Ocean, about 250 miles east of Charleston, South Carolina. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites. The ferrying halves will land a little bit downrange from the booster landing zone. SpaceX will use one of its East Coast recovery ships to scoop up those ferrying halves. You can see here this image from SpaceX showing the one half of the payload fairing, the clamshell-like fairing that encloses the Starlink satellites during launch. They descend to a soft landing on the ocean under a parachute or parasail. They're then picked up by one of the recovery vessels and returned to Cape Canaveral for refurbishment. SpaceX estimates it saves about $7 million by picking these payload fairings up and reusing them. Its first launch was a crewed mission just over a year ago, 2 years ago, on October 5th, 2022. It was the Crew 5 mission to the International Space Station aboard the Dragon named Endurance. That mission was also the first time a Russian cosmonaut flew to the station. The next launch for this booster came on January 18th, 2023, with the launch of the GPS Space Vehicle 6 satellites. Launch number 3 was a month later. It carried the Inmarsat 6F2 satellite communications vehicle. That spacecraft did suffer an anomaly after launch. The fourth launch of B-1077 was on March 29th, when it launched 56 satellites on the Starlink 5-10 mission. Its fifth flight was June 5th, when it was on its way to the International Space Station again, carrying cargo on the CRS-28 mission. It brought up a pair of rollout solar arrays in the Dragon's trunk. Its sixth launch was the Galaxy 37 satellite for Intelsat. The seventh, eighth, and ninth launches were all Starlink missions. It then moved on to earlier this year to fly Northrop Grumman's Cygnus spacecraft on a mission to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. It was then back on Starlink duty, launching Starlink 6-43, 6-51, 6-63, and 10-4. That most recent launch occurring on July 28th. Of the Falcon 9, comprises the bottom 2/3 of the rocket. This first stage booster has flown 14 times before. It's designated 1077 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen to produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around that engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to touch down on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Above the first stage is the interstage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the inset image, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it falls back through the atmosphere tail first, like a dart. At the top of the interstage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure there's a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is housed inside the interstage adapter until separation. The upper stage is powered by a single modified Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC. It's equipped with a large engine nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix of kerosene and liquid oxygen as the first stage. At the very top of the rocket is the payload fairing containing the 21 Starlink satellites. The 2 halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange from the drone ship. The view in the big box is coming to us courtesy of SpaceX. You can see the clamp arms have opened up on the strongback structure. We'll soon see that strongback retract to an angle of about 1.5 degrees. You'll notice there's a slight discrepancy between the countdown clocks. That's because the SpaceX feed comes to us on a slight delay. Coming up on the completion of propellant load, we should be hearing a couple of calls shortly on that.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
We have confirmation that the loading of liquid oxygen on the first stage has been completed. T-minus 2 minutes. Did not.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
There's the call of loading of liquid oxygen on the second stage is complete. Hoping that weather conditions remain favorable for launch this morning.
Ground gas closeouts.
You can see the venting as the ground gas closeouts are underway. This purges all the propellant lines at the launch pad to ensure at liftoff there's no issues. Coming up on the 1 minute mark and the switch to the Falcon 9's onboard computers.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And there's confirmation that the Falcon 9 is in startup. 45 seconds.
LD, go for launch.
And we've just had the final go for launch from the launch director. Twenty seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 8-11 mission. And the Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Falcon 9 has reached max Q, the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle.
MVAC in flight chill.
Our tracking team had to deal with some clouds in the area, but we were able to follow it thanks to our team of Adam, Pete, and Chuck and Jen. This view coming from Pete Carson, looking through some cloud. Conditions not ideal for observing a launch today. Going to switch to the SpaceX onboard cameras, which are give you an idea of the cloud cover the Falcon 9 is leaving behind as it climbs away from Florida's Space Coast on this Starlink 8-11 mission. Coming up on separation of the first and second stage, shutdown of the first stage.
Stage separation confirmed.
And MVAC ignition.
Now we see the separation of the Falcon 9 first stage and the ignition of the second stage, the first stage falling away. The onboard camera view from the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen, and on the right-hand side, the Merlin vacuum engine glowing red hot, standing by for payload fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
You can see those 13 Starlink satellites that are equipped for direct-to-cell capabilities. They stand out because they appear to have white dots on their sides. Looks like they were stacked on top. Now 3.5 minutes into flight, the Falcon 9 second stage is at an altitude of 116 kilometers. The first stage is still climbing. It's not quite reached the highest point. It's forward momentum still carrying it higher, now at 115, 116 kilometers. Start to see the speed of the first stage is declining a little, and we'll see that altitude start to drop as the Falcon 9 reaches the high point or apogee of its path as it heads on a trajectory that will take it to the drone ship, which is located in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina, about 250 miles to the east of Charleston. And it looks like the Falcon 9 has started to descend now. You'll see the speed gradually start to pick up. The next major milestone for the first stage will be the entry burn. You'll see that speed picking up, and that entry burn is vital to slow down the first stage as it re-enters the denser layers of the atmosphere. If it did not slow down, it would burn up. So that burn is particularly important, and that's coming up in a short while here. Second stage continues to build speed, approaching 13,500 kilometers per hour as it races to orbit with the 21 Starlink satellites. About less than 20 seconds to the entry burn. You can see still a lot of cloud cover beneath the Falcon 9 first stage. See that speed gradually building, but the Falcon 9 is about to slam on the brakes.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there we see the ignition of some of the Merlin engines on the first stage. You'll see that speed is dramatically reduced. Falcon 9 now under 50 kilometers in altitude, but the burn is slowing it down. And
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
there we see completion of that burn, about a
Both
23-second
vehicles are on a
burn.
nominal trajectory.
The Falcon 9 is heading to the drone ship. Just read the instructions. It's about 385 miles downrange from the launch site. Like the Falcon 9 is going to pass through some cloud on its way down to the landing ship.
Stage 1 transonic.
Now traveling less than the speed of sound, an altitude of coming up on 6 kilometers. Still traveling at just over 1,000 kilometers an hour. It's passed through that upper layer of cloud, and conditions now look good. Conditions in the recovery area were an issue yesterday and prevented the launch.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
The barge coming into view here, ignition
Stage
of
1
the
landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Touchdown, booster 1077 on
Stage
the
1
deck
landing confirmed.
of Just Read the Instructions in the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, the second stage continues. We'll see if we hear the call out for second stage engine cutoff. Hopefully we'll see it too.
And back shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
There we have it. Confirmation of the successful